Happy Halloween. This is Asia in Review, and we're here today to discuss an issue that is worthy of Halloween, perhaps one of Halloween's worst, most offensive slasher movies, the subject of the persecution of the Falun Gong in the People's Republic of China. David Day, our regular host, is on assignment, and so I'm Kerry Gershaneck, and I'll be hosting the show today. With me today is Professor Hong Jiang from the University of Hawaii, and we'll be discussing this very serious issue regarding a spiritual group, a spiritual movement that began, a peaceable movement in the People's Republic of China in the 1990s. The PRC government, the Communist Party of China, welcomed the organization at that time because it had dealt with almost martial arts-like movements. It had to do with, quote, truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, a lot of traits that the Chinese have always valued. However, in 1999, for reasons that we'll discuss in detail on the show, the Communist Party of China turned very, very violently against the Falun Gong. As a result of that, there's been numerous apprehensions of Falun Gong followers, Falun Gong practitioners as the term is, torture, very stressful interrogations, murder of at least 3,000, probably more, 4,000 documented, but realistically tens of thousands more. We'll discuss that in more detail as well. The organizations around the world that have challenged the People's Republic of China on this have been few. They've been powerful, but we'll discuss what organizations have weighed in and what organizations have been criminally silent on the situation. Again, it's a campaign that has been severe, it's been brutal, been very ugly and very vicious against the practitioners of what is really a very peaceable spiritual movement. So to explain the movement to our listeners today, so you understand what it's about, how it's practiced, and what the impact has been on a very personal level, Dr. Hong Jiang, and I can call you Hong,
yes,
for the rest of the show. Hong, would you talk to us, explain to us what is Fulan Gong?
So it's a name, even it's foreign to a lot of people in the English-speaking world. It's called Falun Gong. It's also called Falun Dafa. So here probably we're familiar with mind and body practice.
Yes.
And that's what Falun Gong really is in a kind of a general sense. There are two parts to it. One part is movement and meditation. And I have a flyer over here, and that explains, there's a sitting meditation over here. And then if I open it up, and you can see these movements. So it's like a Tai Chi, it's like yoga. So that's one part of it. There are 5 sets of exercises, and if you finish all 5, you're spending 2 hours. One of the hour is sitting meditation. And the other part is important as well, is the teaching. It's a moral teaching that's based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. So that's what Falun Gong is, and that's why you call it a spiritual movement, because it's not just a physical exercise, it's not just meditation, it's about how to be in the world, in the universe.
What was it that made Falun Gong so popular when it first began in the 1990s? As we'll discuss later, the Communist Party clearly began to see it as a threat after a while because of its the massive numbers of people who were joining up, numbers that the Communist Party saw might surpass its 60 million person membership. So what was so popular about it?
It's interesting. So we need to go back to history just a little bit.
Yes.
1949, Communist Party took over control of China, and
Yes.
there are various movements, including the devastating Cultural Revolution in 1966 and 76, and much of the Chinese cultural tradition was being lost and destroyed. And the Chinese people are left in a kind of a vacuum. a spiritual
Spiritual
vacuum
vacuum.
of not knowing the culture, not knowing the beliefs anymore, not knowing the practices. And then you have the death of Mao, and post-Mao era, China opened it up, and then there are very active people were very actively searching for something they can hold on to. It's not just money, you know.
Yes.
And today you see China, it's really so much about money, but there are a large number of people who are searching, and that's where Qigong became very popular. You had hundreds, sometimes you count thousands of Qigong schools. You go to the parks, and in the morning, every morning, you see all different groups of people doing exercises. And a lot of them are doing traditional ways of exercises. Qigong and Tai Chi were examples. And so that Falun Gong came into the scene in 1991 and quickly attracted a lot of people into the practice, and very quickly the Communist Party saw that in 1996 and 98, as you said, the Communist Party first praised the practice.
Yes.
Because the practice is really helping people to gain health, physical health, and also health of the mind. They become better human beings, better contributors in the society because of these principles of being truthful, compassionate, and tolerance.
But in 1999, there's an incident that occurs in Beijing that turns the Communist Party of China 180 degrees around on Falun Gong, turns the Communist Party of China. And just so our listeners understand, the government of China is the party. The Communist Party runs the People's Republic of China. There is no democracy there. It's a very small number of Chinese communists who vote for a much smaller number on the Central Committee. They run the country. President Xi Jinping sounds neat. Oh, president, he must be elected. Well, he is, but by a very small number of Chinese communists. So the party is all powerful, and that's why we say the party made these decisions, because that's how it works in China. The Communist Party makes all the decisions. So in 1999, the Communist Party turns on Falun Gong. Why? What happens, and then what happens next?
It's interesting. The turn didn't happen just in 1999, 180 degrees. It was turning slowly. So what happened was that Falun Gong started to be open to the public.
Yes.
In 1992. The teacher of Falun Gong, Mr. Li Hongzhi, started to give these large lectures in all over China. And also people can learn from other people who had learned free of charge. Anybody can learn it. And also it's so popular and so effective in terms of improving people's health and improving people's kind of well-being overall. So it's so popular that first the party praised it and gave awards to Mr. Li Hongzhi and gave to Falun Gong. And later on they saw, hey, there's so many people practicing. And there were, the number was given by the Communist Party organizations because they started to check on how many people were practicing. The number they gave was 70 to 100 million people practicing Falun Gong.
Okay,
and that's
so the
more
party
than the party
membership
members.
is 60 million.
Exactly.
So now you've exceeded the religion in China forced on the Chinese people is the Communist Party.
You're
and
right.
if you have competition to the predominant religion that is maintained through the barrel of a gun, as Mao said, that's a threat. That's a threat to the Central Committee. It's a threat to the leadership of the Communist Party.
That's exactly. So they started to secretively send police to all over China, to
Yes.
the different practice sites. These sites are all grassroots, and anybody can come. So they would go to the practice site of Falun Gong, and they go into there to start to check their names, because Falun Gong group themselves don't ever ask names, and anybody can come. It's a grassroots kind of organization. All you do is that you go to the parks to practice every day. So from 1996 on, there were the Communist Party started to kind of look into Falun Gong to see, well, you know, is there any problem with the group? They couldn't find anything. But still, starting from 1998, I believe, the Communist Party started to ban Falun Gong books.
Oh, as early as
Although-
98.
That's
okay,
right.
okay.
Actually, 1997, 2 years
Okay.
before the persecution officially launched.
I see.
At the time, the Communist Party said, with Qigong, all these Qigong groups, we're not going to say anything, we're not going to criticize you, we're going to just leave you alone. But the party did that rule that they set. They started to ban books. And then what happened in 1999, that this incident you mentioned was the police started to arrest a lot of people in Tianjin, which is a next city close to Beijing. And Falun Gong practitioners went there to say, well, you know, you need to release these people. And Tianjin police said, we can't do anything. You need to go to Beijing. So a lot of people went to Beijing around the government compound. There's an office that is receiving appeals from the people. So
Yes.
there's actually an official office open to the people. Anybody can come in and appeal. So a lot of people went in to appeal. It was a very peaceful appeal to the government to release Falun Gong practitioners.
Yes.
So that's the incident that happened. At that time, the then Premier Zhu Rongji came out to meet with the Falun Gong representative and said, you know, no problem, we release.
He supports him, but
yeah,
he gets overruled, doesn't he?
Exactly. So it was the president, then party secretary Jiang Zemin, who
Yes.
said, no, you can't allow this large group to function, and we need to, you know, eradicate them. That's when the persecution started.
And that's when the persecution, that's when the world turns very dark, very ugly for the practitioners. The torture begins, the imprisonment, the human organ harvesting that we'll talk about in part 2 of our segment, which is coming up. We're with Asia in Review. We're with Professor Hong Jiang from University of Hawaii. And we are discussing the Falun Gong movement and its brutal suppression by the Chinese Communist Party of the People's Republic of China. Today we'll be discussing, continue to discuss the nature of Falun Gong and as a spiritual movement. We will also discuss the ways that the People's Republic of China government persecutes Falun Gong practitioners. We'll also discuss in part 3 of our show today what it is that the world has done in response to this very brutal persecution. And then we'll talk about what are the prospects under President Xi Jinping. What is the prospect for perhaps some relenting of this persecution under this relatively new leadership, and how the world ought to proceed from here in light of what is very much a failed response to this persecution. The guests that we have will talk shortly about your family. Can you tell us how your family ties into this terrible persecution?
So when we talk about 100 million people practicing Falun Gong in China, you're talking about maybe about 8% of Chinese population. So many people would have personal connections.
Yes.
People from China would have personal connections with people who practice Falun Gong, and I'm one of them. My aunt, my mother's sister started to practice Falun Gong in 1994. My mother started to practice in 1996, and there are more. So just stay with the 2 of them. Both of them practice Falun Gong initially because of health issues. My aunt had very severe arthritis. My mother had these chronic fatigue and heart problem and blood pressure. Both of them had a lot of issues with health. That's one part of it that is drawing them to these traditional practices. And the other thing is the teaching of Falun Gong really speak to the Chinese soul, because it is part of the ancient Chinese tradition. It's not a new practice. It's actually a traditional ancient practice in China that handed down through private teachings only in the past, and then the current teacher Li, made it available to the public. So they were very much drawn to it. That's how they started to practice.
And we'll talk at the end of the break. We're coming up on a break now. We'll talk at the end of the break about the price your family has paid for practicing this spiritual movement, for following the spiritual movement, this effort to gain health and spiritual fulfillment in what was basically a spiritual vacuum.
I'm Jay Fidel, founder of ThinkTech Hawaii. We are a digital media nonprofit that covers things that matter to tech, energy, diversification, globalism, and progress for our state, the state of Hawaii. We broadcast on community television and on Oceanic Cable Channel 16. We also stream our shows and interviews live on the internet as both radio and video, and of course we post them here on YouTube. We collaborate with the Hawaii Venture Capital Association to present monthly luncheon programs on subjects of interest to the business community, and we write for the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. ThinkTech works hard to raise public awareness in Hawaii. Check out our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and come to our YouTube channel, ThinkTech Hawaii. We hope you support our mission and that you like our work. I'm Jay Fidel. Mahalo.
It's stressful. You have to deal with that.
This is Asia in Review. David Day, renowned international lawyer, is on assignment. I am Kerry Gershaneck, standing in for him, and my guest today, Professor Hong Jiang from the University of Hawaii, and the topic today, a grim one, the persecution of the Falun Gong religious sect from the People's Republic of China. The first part of our program, we laid the foundation. We described Falun Gong and what it is that its practitioners do to for their health, for their spiritual fulfillment as members of this this movement. We introduced Professor Jiang's personal ties to the movement, and that she introduced her family who were members of Falun Gong. And now we're going to proceed with what could be a rather hard part of the show for those 14 and under, so I'd recommend you think twice about having them listen, because we're going to get quite graphic in terms of how the Communist Party of China and the People's Republic of China persecutes the practitioners of Falun Gong. So, Hong, can you pick up now with perhaps your family participation in Falun Gong, and then take us to what is it precisely that the Communist Party of China is doing to the 70 to 100 million members of the Falun Gong movement?
Interesting, when the persecution first started, the day the official persecution started,
Yes.
in 1999, I was in China. I was doing my research in China. I was actually with my mother, who practices Falun Gong, and I was watching the 7 o'clock evening news. This is July 21st, I believe, July 20th of 1999. You can feel the terror. This is hard to describe. Not familiar with China. When you look at the evening news, and they have these stern people talk about Falun Gong as anti-government, as a practice that has to be rooted out. You know, a bloody event movement is happening. It's like another cultural
the Communist
revolution.
Party prepared the rest of the people in China through propaganda, through harsh rhetoric, through the media. Is that how it happened?
Oh, yeah.
To turn against Falun Gong practitioners?
And we have to remember, media is the party's mouthpiece.
Yes.
It's not the media that in the West that we understand as a public expression. It's the party's tool.
So Xinhua, CCTV, they're all
of them
belong to the government.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. So you have the TV media, you have the newspaper, and you have even the all workplace, all schools, all part of the persecution. What happened if you go to school, you practice Falun Gong, your parents practice Falun Gong, you are going to be pressured. Some children had been dismissed from schools because they continue to practice, or the family members continue to practice.
So what were these children taught in school? Were they just
taught,
dismissed, or were they
were taught in school.
demonized first?
They were told the Falun Gong practice is evil, and you have to stop it. You have to, if you practice it, you need to write a promise to say, I denounce Falun Gong as evil practice, I will stop practicing Falun Gong. So even for children at schools, you had to do that. And for people at regular workplace, all workplace became instruments of persecution.
I understand even in the military, there's a large number of military officers and enlisted personnel who were members of Falun Gong, and
They are, that's right, they either had to stop or they're dismissed. That's actually the kind of more gentle treatment.
Right.
The harsher treatment would be you are taken to the labor camps, and they taken to what they call education center. It really is a brainwashing center, and detention center, and they're sent to prison and tortured, and the other things that are happening. We'll talk later about.
and
all the
interrogated,
interrogated.
first I would imagine, so they would, or from what I've read, interrogated very harshly to find out who the other members of the Falun Gong are, and family members and friends and co-workers who are members.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And let me give you a few examples. So first, my aunt, who practices Falun Gong, and she was arrested in December 2006, and was put to detention center, no legal procedures whatsoever, and then she was sentenced. She was given a sentence, given to her alone. Family members had no idea, and she was given a week to find a lawyer to defend her. How can she ever find a lawyer to defend her if she couldn't even get the information out? So
she just disappeared. The family didn't know where she was.
the family knew where she was, but couldn't visit her.
Couldn't visit her, couldn't assist.
So they sentenced her 7 years in prison because she had Falun Gong material at home. And she would have flyers like this at her
Right.
home, and that's the basically evidence of her crime. And so her 7 years sentence in prison, and her crime was subversion of state power. So that's her. And there were other cases, these brutal methods of torture. The goal of the torture is so that you can write your confession letter and stop the practice. If you stop the practice, if you write the letter to say I'll stop, I'll denounce Falun Gong, you are left. You're going to leave the prison. Otherwise, you are criminal.
If you confess, you are let go, but it didn't apply to your family members. I mean, 7 years is a 7-year sentence.
That's right. 7 years sentence in
tens of
prison.
thousands of others remain in prison, so even a confession doesn't necessarily get you
That's
freedom.
Right. Exactly.
And the reports, the confirmed reports are at this point, how many have been murdered by the regime who've been taken into custody?
There was one Falun Gong support group that did this documentation. And you have to remember, it's very hard to know what's really going on in China. It's
Yes.
hard to go into China to get the information. It's hard to get the information out. So what they could document was over 3,733 specific cases of torture and death. These
Yes.
were death from torture.
Right.
Of
So
the
it's
Falun
not
Gong
just they died in
practitioners.
captivity. That's another number of those who have died from just natural causes, hunger, maltreatment, but direct
That's right, yeah.
torture.
This
We're
is
looking
direct
at
torture.
documented 3,700 plus cases.
And this doesn't include any number from death from organ harvesting. That's a totally different
Okay,
ballpark.
so let's talk about organ harvesting. And again, I caution our listeners that if you have children under 14, I would think twice about having them listen to this next part, because it's very, very hard to take. Describe what we mean, or what is meant by organ harvesting, and then tell me how it's practiced against the Falun Gong.
You're right about this atrocity. It's so hard to imagine. It gives everybody shivers to think. I mean, basically, it's a live person. Everything's still fine, functioning. Are pulled onto the operation table, cut open, and take out the vital organs.
Because people need those organs somewhere else.
They sell the organs to somebody who's waiting to get an organ transplantation. And the person, this person's family had no clue the person, the Falun Gong practitioners are actually held in these concentration camps,
Yes.
waiting to be killed. Family members had no idea, and they also didn't know until they were pulled to the table, and also they were given the injection so that they won't, fight for it. But they had no idea before they were killed they are going to be killed.
For
And,
their organs. Yeah. Now, China is notorious for what's called transplant tourism. People know that on a proportion that is very suspect even to the UN, which has done very little about this, the number of available kidneys, number of available hearts, number of available livers, all those organs that can be transplanted, the proportion that are available in China are far out of whack compared to what would be available in any other country. And so there is a very vibrant, what they call transplant tourism that goes to China. If you need a liver, if you need a kidney, if you need a heart, you just fly to China and they'll fix you up. And one of the sources of the organs that they use to fix you up are prisoners. And China has acknowledged that in the past. What they suppress is the number of Falun Gong practitioners whose organs are taken and given to those transplant tourists who go into China.
And
So please continue the description of how this is done.
And the number of Falun Gong practitioners killed for the organs are far surpassing the prisoners who are on death row. So in the 1980s, Chinese government started to take organs from the death row prisoners.
Yes.
That's actually known. But then since 1999, I actually think since 2000, this number started to go up really very, very rapidly. And where do you get the organs? And so the first revelation came in 2006 from a woman who named herself Annie. And she worked for a hospital in Northeast China. And her husband also worked for the hospital. And her husband was a surgeon. Apparently harvested 2,000 corneas from, later on he knew, were Falun Gong practitioners, and these people were live.
And the corneas are used to improve the eyesight of those who come into China as transplant tourists who don't know the source of the corneas. So by flying in, you are directly contributing to the Communist Party of China's slaughter of these prisoners for their organs.
Exactly. So that's just one part, and then you have all the other parts that here's a price list. You have the lungs, you have the hearts. Kidney is one example that you mentioned. For kidney transplantation, I understand there are a lot of tissue matching, blood matching has had to be involved. So the international standard for any organ, vital, wait for accident to happen. You have to sometimes wait for many months, sometimes years.
Yep.
But in China, these hospitals promise that they are going to get your organ, finish all the operation within a month, within 3 to 4 weeks.
And the Communist Party makes a lot of money off this. A cornea goes for how much? A replaced cornea?
Is 30,000.
And a new liver can be how much?
Liver is 98,000 to 130,000.
You want a new heart in China? What's that going to cost
Heart is
you?
130 to 160,000.
Okay, lungs?
Lungs 150 to 170,000.
Dollars, yep. And
Yeah, this is all US dollars. And kidney,
kidney and pancreas,
150,000. Yeah, so these were basically the money that's made by these basically institutions that's connected to the government.
So there's both a political incentive for persecuting the Falun Gong, and there's an economic incentive for persecuting the Falun Gong and sending them to these basically death camps where organs can be harvested from them. We're with Asia in Review, and this is Professor Hong Jiang from the University of Hawaii. The topic today is the People's Republic of China persecution of the Falun Gong spiritual movement in China. And the topic, again, quite grim, appropriate for a Halloween night, only if you really like the slasher movies, because this is a real-life slasher movie. This is a real-life horror show that is going on right now in the second largest economy in the world, which is the People's Republic of China, right after the United States. That's the second largest economy. And one way that that economy is being grown is through the harvesting of human organs from Falun Gong practitioners who have been sentenced without any due process to prisons in the People's Republic of China. The break is coming up on us very soon. When we return from the break, Professor Jiang and I will discuss the international organizations such as the United Nations, Amnesty International, the United States, for example, and what they're doing in response to this hideous, barbaric practice that's being conducted by the Communist Party of China.
We want to thank our underwriters.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company.
The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
Welcome back to Asian Review. I'm Kerry Gershaneck, standing in for renowned international lawyer David Day, who is on assignment today. Topic today, the Communist Party of China's persecution of the Falun Gong spiritual movement in China. Our special guest, an expert on the topic, is Professor Hong Jiang from the University of Hawaii. We've covered thus far, what is Falun Gong? What makes it so scary to the leadership of the People's Republic of China that it's willing to murder so many of its practitioners in what are basically death camps? We've talked about how the Communist Party of China persecutes the Falun Gong practitioners, the heavy propaganda, the hate radio, the hate television, all the news organizations belong to the propaganda department of the Communist Party of China. So how they're using their news media organizations to create a hateful environment against the practitioners. We've seen how through Professor Jiang's very, very careful explanation, how even school children are turned against the Falun Gong practitioners, other children in their class. And then we went into rather graphically and disturbingly what it is that the Communist Party does to the people they take into custody, the Falun Gong practitioners, how they brutally interrogate them, how they torture them, how they imprison them for ridiculously long periods, and those are the lucky ones. The unlucky ones are used for organ harvesting, organs that are taken from them, a heart that will sell for up to $160,000 for someone flying into China for the transplant, eye corneas that go for $30,000, a liver for up to $130,000, all profits that go into Communist Party of China coffers. So for this segment, we're going to talk about what the world has done in response to this brutal suppression of a spiritual movement in China. So, Hong, would you characterize the world response on a level of, say, that you would see if there was an Israeli atrocity against the Palestinians, or perhaps the NSA spying on some of our neighbors? Is the response anywhere near the roar that you hear in response to those type of activities?
What's interesting is that in 1999, when the persecution first started, as we mentioned, the Chinese Communist Party support the persecution with heavy propaganda, and
Yes.
including the then President Jiang Zemin, who launched the persecution at one of the diplomatic relations meeting gave a copy to, I forget which country's leader, a booklet basically defaming Falun Gong. So
Yes.
it gets to that level of propaganda, and the Chinese propaganda are right now are coming out of China on the internet, through newspapers everywhere in the world. So the world initially had no idea what is Falun Gong, and suddenly this is the practice that became the target of the Communist Party.
Yes.
So they first learned about Falun Gong through the Communist Party media. And that's where you still hear, even in the US here, when some people are describing Falun Gong, they say it in the words, I know they've read the Communist Party propaganda. And so a lot of education is required even there. So the world was not really responding in the beginning.
They were accepting
because
basically the
they just
accusations
had
against the Falun
Beijing's
Gong.
basically term description of what is Falun Gong.
Yes.
And slowly you have more information and people involved in disseminating information. And also some of the groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch started to report these torture cases of Falun Gong. I mean, these torture cases, I read some of them. There were about 100 torture methods used. I can't even finish reading them.
No, we
And
probably can't go into graphic detail anymore than we already have on the
That's right.
radio, but they're hideous. I've read them as well. So
that's right,
a
yeah.
few organizations stand up. Freedom House, for example, U.S. State Department,
US
to its credit, has actually
that's right.
not ruled on this issue. We have spoken up about it. How effective has it been?
Not really effective in the way that I think the U.S. Let's say take the U.S. for example.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. State Department did include every year they have a human rights reports on China. They've
Yes.
talked about a couple years ago. They included the information that half the people in China's labor camps are Falun Gong practitioners, and there are hundreds of thousands are imprisoned and tortured. And just last year, the U.S. State Department also included a paragraph about organ harvesting from Falun Gong practitioners. So there are
So the
information out
United
there.
States, at least, is raising the issue, if not terribly forcefully.
But I don't think they use the issue strongly in
Right.
International relations, in relationship with China, with trade, for example.
Do you know if it was on the agenda when President Obama met with President Xi in
I wish.
California? No, it wasn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk then about the United Nations. One has to have hope that the United Nations has taken a stand on this. It used to be called the UN Commission on Human Rights. I understand that Kofi Annan got rid of that because it was wildly ineffective. So who's taken the mantle on this at the UN, if anybody?
So the UN, after the dismissal of the commission, was it like there's a commission, Human Rights Council was established. And China was on the council, so what can you say? They have veto rights. And countries like China, Cuba, Saudi Arabia, so these kind of countries.
Algeria and
yeah.
some of the countries that do not have stellar records on human rights aren't necessarily going to be looking for other countries that do not have stellar records on human rights and pick on them. So
That's right.
So it's ineffectual.
That's right. And the other thing is that the way that China is dealing with international relations is that China insists on bilateral talks, private talks about these issues. So in a way that these issues don't come to the open, human rights issues don't come to the open in international relations between China and another country. And China also claimed that we have this is our internal affair. You can't interfere. This is our sovereignty.
Right.
Yeah. So because
That's
of
always their fallback position. And that's
that's
a core
right, yeah.
interest that we're able to take care of.
I mean, other things that China has been seen as the marketplace in the world. So the world nations are looking at China as the trade partner. So therefore, in order to keep the trade relation, they are very soft. Even U.S., principles of human rights and freedom of belief is very important for the U.S. But the U.S. is not taking a strong stance on this.
Then if the answer is what have international organizations done in response to this barbaric persecution of the Falun Gong, if the answer is not enough, which it appears to be from what you're describing, what organizations do we turn to? Has the U.S. Congress been of any value? The State Department is part of the executive branch. What has the U.S. Congress done on this, if anything, that might be helpful?
The Congress, to its credit, has passed a few resolutions. The last one passed was Resolution 605.
Out of which house, or both
this
houses?
is from the House.
Oh, from the House of Representatives.
Not the Senate.
Okay, so
And right now there is a House resolution in standing, proposed already. There are about, today I checked, 150 co-sponsors already. It's a House resolution 281 condemning China's organ harvesting, live organ harvesting from Falun Gong practitioners.
okay, so the House of Representatives is doing its job.
That's
and
still waiting to be voted.
Okay, so and they've had hearings.
They are waiting. For this particular one, it's not on the floor yet.
Okay.
So hopefully it will be voted on the floor. And the Senate has not done nearly enough. Somehow.
No hearings, no resolutions, nothing.
Not initiated from the Senate.
Okay, so we would call Harry Reid and say, Senator Reid, can you recognize a human rights violation when you see it, and would you do something about it? Is that the approach that we ought to be?
That would be good.
That would be good.
Yeah.
The future prospects, Xi Jinping, everybody, whenever there's a new leader of, say, the Soviet Union, or a new leader of the People's Republic of China, the usual suspects are always, hopeful. They're optimistic that things will change, and that long dormant impulse for Jeffersonian democracy and human rights will burst forward and forth in the ray of the morning light. What's your prognosis? Where does Xi Jinping take this?
When the persecution started in 1999, that was by the then Chinese leader Jiang Zemin.
Yes.
And there were some hope that when that leadership changed to Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao, that may be some change going that could take place. Given my reading of the internal reports, this doesn't come out, that Hu and Wen were kind of softer on some of these persecution kind of items, but they couldn't do anything because there were strong military involvement there. The Jiang Zemin's power was very, very strong. And now we have a new president, Xi Jinping, and is he going to be able to do something? What's interesting, there are two factors going on here. One is that we all have heard about the Bo Xilai trial, and Bo is on the other side. Basically, this is an internal factional politics. So Bo Xilai was closely related to Jiang Zemin, who Bo Xilai was also personally involved in the persecution of Falun Gong, in the organ harvesting, and also selling the bodies. But those things were not coming out at all in the trials in China. So in a way that even though you have the factional politics, that the current president would like to take out this other faction that's happened to be the faction that persecute Falun Gong, but the trials are not pointing to these really kind of the most serious violations, the harvesting of organ from live people. So in a way that the party is still the party, and you can see the Xi Jinping, the current president, is really bringing back the Mao idea again, and new censorship on the internet. So I think the party hasn't changed, even though these administrations have changed.
The Communist Party, though, has never had a self-correcting mechanism in the past. They still revere Mao.
They still do.
And this is a man who killed more Chinese than any other foreign country in the history of the world. So there's no way that they can self-correct, correct?
They claim to self-correct, and after Mao died, there were certain policies were corrected, but then it's not in terms of the fundamental principles were going to stay the same, and they still want to make sure that Mao stays as a positive image in people's mind. And even now, today, you can't go back and really openly research for Cultural Revolution and for the greatest famine in modern history in 1960s. You still can't do that. So now then you have 1989, the Tiananmen massacre, nobody can touch, and Falun Gong, nobody can touch.
Right, and some of the new members that came in with Xi Jinping, and they're involved, as you suggested earlier, in this
That's
persecution, and so this party simply can't admit that happened. It's the equivalent to admitting to Auschwitz or Dachau,
Exactly.
and so that will never happen. External pressure, what can the United States do? What ought to be done by the world at this point?
One thing is, as we said, I would hope the U.S. government can do more. But it's not, given the U.S. Kind of all these other concerns about financial breakdown, about economic situation, connection with China, China's rise in economic aspect. Right. So I'm not sure how much that can change. But one thing as an educator, that I always hope for and do what I can do in my small part is basically educate people. I actually would go out to, if I have the time, I would go out to Waikiki and hand out information about these to visitors.
And you wouldn't worry about having your picture taken. I remember when I was working the Asia Pacific Economic Conference that was here, APEC, a few years ago when the Falun Gong came to demonstrate. I was amazed at how many photographers were taking pictures of the Falun Gong demonstrators, and it wasn't the picture that would go on the front page of the People's Daily. These were pictures. I was watching the photographers carefully, and there were many, many of them, and they were taking panorama pictures,
they
very
want to make
slowly,
sure they don't miss anybody,
clicking,
right?
starting on the right, click, 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 moving to the left. So my guess is that when you're handing these out, that you should be smiling, because your picture will be taken as well.
You see, I'm not afraid. I'm an American citizen.
Yes.
And I don't plan to go to China until the persecution of Falun Gong stops. So I figure, I can openly do my part. And but what you described doesn't surprise me, because the Chinese government does send out a lot of spies, and I have been having my pictures taken in Waikiki. And they actually kind of hide behind somewhere. They take pictures and say, oh, whatever. You can take it in the open.
But it doesn't look like you'll be going back soon, because as one prognosis that I read is that as conditions, the economic situation isn't quite as rosy in China as portrayed. As that deteriorates, as there's other economic and social and political issues, perhaps the persecution of the Falun Gong will step up to distract the people. It's the equivalent of what happened to the Jews in Europe with the Nazis. You had to have a scapegoat, and perhaps it'll be a long time before you get to go back to the mainland China.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. That could be one possible scenario. And in China now you have like over 200,000 large-scale protests every year. There's a lot of pressure going on there, and plus the possible economic meltdown. So I just hope, the Chinese people are going to come out peacefully without too much additional trauma that they have gone through a lot.
But I would like to end on an optimistic note, so we will hold that thought. We will hope for the outcome, a peaceful outcome, but more than a peaceful outcome, because that as an end in itself isn't necessarily the only right outcome. The outcome is that we have human rights in China, that we have respect for religion, we have respect for the people of China. You notice that I've said throughout, this is the Communist Party of China that's behind this. It's not the people of China. The Chinese people are the victims here.
You're right.
And so one hopes that the future for the Chinese people, for China, is much better than the present is with them. So I thank you so much, Professor Hong Jiang from the University of Hawaii, and our somewhat grim topic today on this Halloween day of 2013 is the persecution of the Fulan Gong spiritual movement in China. And next week we will take up another aspect dealing with the People's Republic of China, dealing with the news media, and we welcome you to join us next week, and we welcome you to share this particular show by email link and through podcast with all your friends, and perhaps on Facebook, Twitter, and other ways that you can disseminate it. This is Kerry Gershaneck with Asia in Review and Professor Hong Jiang, and thank you, Hong, for being with us today.
Thank you.